Picture a party. Not just any party, but one where the bank vaults boast a guest list that would make the Oscars blush, and the murmur of secrets is louder than the clinking of champagne glasses. This is the world of tax havens. For as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated by the quiet stories hidden behind history's most gilded doors. And there are few stories more hidden or more opulent than this one. These places aren't just dots on a map, they are meticulously designed fiscal utopias, clandestine financial playgrounds for the global elite, a parallel reality where, it seems, tax codes are treated more like gentle suggestions than hard rules. It's a world where old money doesn't just find a sanctuary, it throws a lavish, never-ending party, far from the prying eyes of the rest of us. But what if we could get past the velvet rope? What if we could get a backstage pass to understand how this secret world was built, who its architects were, and why it's now facing a crisis that could change everything? That's exactly what we're going to do. Together, we're going to uncover the secret history of tax havens. But when you think of this secret history, where does your mind go? To ancient kings burying treasure? Medieval merchants with secret ledgers? The surprising truth is that the story of tax havens is a relatively modern one. For most of history, the very concept was simply unnecessary. Before the late 19th and early 20th centuries, there were no income taxes. Wealth was meant to be displayed, not hidden. It was the era of men like William Randolph Hearst, who wanted to build the type of houses God would have built if he had the money. And then the party crashes arrived: income and inheritance taxes. Suddenly, for the first time, a portion of your earnings wasn't entirely yours. And when the main ballroom is no longer safe, the most resourceful guests start looking for secret passageways. These first havens weren't ancient traditions, they were modern inventions, emergency exits built in direct response to this new reality. And at the forefront of building these first, most elegant emergency exits were two very different architects with two profoundly different visions of paradise. On one hand, you have the OG godfather of this financial underworld, Switzerland. In a Europe constantly racked by war and instability, Switzerland's killer feature was its steadfast neutrality. But it offered more than just physical safety. It promised a different kind of sanctuary. Think of it less as a country and more as a fortress. Cold, alpine, impenetrable. A Fort Knox of finance. It wasn't selling glamour, it was selling silence. The promise that your affairs, your assets, your secrets would be locked away in a vault of state-sponsored discretion. This wasn't just a gentleman's agreement, it was law. The legendary Swiss Banking Act of 1934 made it a criminal offense for a banker to reveal a client's identity. The vault was officially sealed. It was the birth of an entire industry built on precision and privacy, with the Zurich-Zurich-Liechtenstein axis becoming a sort of Avengers of finance, each with their own speciality, assembled to protect wealth at all costs. But if Switzerland was the silent, sterile fortress, then just across the border, Monaco was the sun-drenched, champagne-fueled, endless party on a super yacht. Monaco understood a different human desire, not just to be safe, but to be seen, to belong. It wasn't just selling a zero-income tax policy, it was selling a lifestyle, an invitation to the most exclusive club on earth, staged against the backdrop of jaw-dropping casinos and the sparkling blue of the Riviera. Here, wealth wasn't hidden away in a mountain vault, it was on display. It was the roar of a vintage car through a tunnel, the clinking of glasses on a terrace, the quiet confidence of people who knew the rules of tax didn't really apply to them. It was, as one observer put it, a graceful pas de deux, a delicate dance between high society and secretive finances. So you had the two founding models, the Swiss promise of absolute secrecy and the Monegasque promise of a beautiful life, the vault and the party. For a time, they dominated this new secret world, but the monopoly on financial secrecy wasn't destined to last. Across the Atlantic, a new generation of upstarts was watching, learning, and getting ready to play the game in a completely different way. Across the Atlantic, a new generation of upstarts was watching, learning, and getting ready to play the game in a completely different way. These weren't old European dynasties, these were sun-drenched islands in the Caribbean. And they weren't just joining the game, they were planning to rewrite the rules. If Switzerland was the established legacy enterprise, the Caribbean nations, led by pioneers like the Bahamas and Bermuda, were the hungry tech startups. They couldn't compete on centuries of tradition, so they chose to compete on sheer innovation. Their killer app? Financial products the old guard had barely considered, like the now infamous Shell Corporation. It's a concept of almost breathtaking simplicity. Think of it as a financial invisibility cloak for your assets, a company that exists only on paper, a legal fiction designed for one purpose: to own things without revealing the true owner. They paired this with another clever tool, the Asset Protection Trust, creating a near impenetrable shield for wealth. This disruption didn't just challenge the old guard, it shattered the market wide open. It triggered a new phase in the game, the age of the specialist. It was no longer enough to just offer secrecy. Now you had to be the best at something specific. The Cayman Islands, for example, pursued their goal with surgical precision. They didn't want to be everything to everyone. They wanted to achieve hedge fund preeminence. They tailored their laws, like the banks and trust companies regulation law, to create the perfect low-friction environment for this highly lucrative industry. And it worked. By 2008, this tiny territory had become the fourth largest financial center on the planet. Meanwhile, back in Europe, Luxembourg unveiled its own secret weapon. As a founding member of the EU, it offered something no island paradise could: a legitimate, compliant gateway into the world's largest single market. For a corporation, channeling investments through Luxembourg wasn't just about finding a refuge, it was about strategically using a launchpad into the heart of Europe. And just as the board was getting crowded, two new titans entered from the east. First, Hong Kong, which offered an irresistible cocktail, a bustling free port with zero capital gains tax, all underwritten by the unimpeachable security of the British common law system. It was like, as one observer put it, lounging in a five-star resort that just so happens to have a fortress-grade security system. Then came its quiet, methodical neighbor, Singapore. While Hong Kong thrived on dynamic energy, Singapore's currency was something even more valuable in a turbulent Southeast Asia: absolute, unshakable stability. It became the Switzerland of Asia, a safe harbor for regional wealth spooked by political uncertainty. So, in just a few decades, the landscape had been completely transformed. The quiet, exclusive club of two had exploded into a loud, global, and brutally competitive marketplace. Each new player brought a new strategy, a new tool, a new angle. The game was faster, more complex, and bigger than anyone could have imagined. And all that noise was starting to attract some very unwelcome attention. And that attention didn't just come as a polite letter, it arrived like a coordinated global ambush. The freewheeling party of the last few decades was over. The 1980s was the decade the lights came on. And the first to flip the switch was the United States. With the Caribbean Basin Economic Recovery Act, it began applying serious pressure in its own financial backyard, changing the rules for its neighbors and signaling that the era of turning a blind eye was ending. It was the first tremor. Then came the earthquake. The Bank of Credit and Commerce International, or BCCI, based in Luxembourg, collapsed in a spectacular cloud of fraud, corruption, and money laundering. It wasn't just a bank failure, it was a devastating reputational blow to the entire offshore world. The scandal sent shockwaves through the system, leaving a stain that tainted everyone. The veneer of quiet, respectable service was shattered, revealing a potential for rot that the world's governments could no longer ignore. This gave the perfect opening for a new, powerful protagonist to enter the story: the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. In 1998, it did something unprecedented. It published a report that was, for all intents and purposes, a blacklist. It publicly named 35 jurisdictions as tax havens, effectively branding them on the world stage. This wasn't just about finance anymore, it was about national reputation. The game had shifted from a private contest to a very public shaming, but the true finishing moves were yet to come. In the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, the world's largest economies, the G20, decided that enough was enough. They armed the OECD with a new arsenal of acronyms, each one a weapon designed to dismantle financial secrecy. There was BEPS, a complex set of rules designed to stop multinational companies from playing a global game of hide-and-seek with their profits. And then the ultimate weapon, the CRS, or Common Reporting Standard. Imagine the old system as a series of disconnected phone lines. Every bank in every haven was its own private island of information. The CRS was the installation of a massive, global financial switchboard. It connected the tax authorities of over 100 countries, forcing banks to automatically report on accounts held by foreigners. Suddenly, there were no more secret rooms. Glass walls were being erected everywhere. Information that was once locked in a Swiss vault was now being automatically routed to the tax office back home. There was simply no place left to hide. And yet, the game adapts. Even as this global vice was tightening, new moves were being made. In the Middle East, Dubai, strategically looking to pivot its economy away from oil, began to fashion itself into a financial hub with its own unique attractions. It was a clear signal that even in an age of transparency, the drive to find a financial edge would not simply vanish. The old empires were falling, but new contenders were already plotting their rise. But perhaps the most surprising contender wasn't a glittering Middle Eastern metropolis. It was an island in America's own backyard, Puerto Rico. For years, it was a clever but relatively quiet loophole. Thanks to local laws like the Economic Development Act, an American could move there, pay almost no taxes on their investment gains, and never even need a passport. It was like having a duty-free shop in your own country, a fascinating but niche strategy. And then something happened that transformed Puerto Rico from an intriguing subplot into a main character: cryptocurrency. As Bitcoin and other digital assets created a new class of millionaires overnight, they needed a place to realize their gains without handing a huge slice back to the government. Puerto Rico was perfect. Suddenly, the very texture of wealth itself was changing. The quiet, discreet image of an old patriarch in a wood-paneled Geneva office, hearing the soft click of a vault, was being replaced. The new image? A young tech influencer like Logan Paul or Brock Pierce, vlogging from a sun-drenched villa in San Juan, their fortunes existing not in steel safes, but on a sliver of silicon. This wasn't just a new destination, it was a new kind of gold rush, powered by code and charisma. It was a profound challenge to the old world order. The battle for wealth wasn't just about laws and loopholes anymore, it was about culture. And in this new game, the traditional havens, with their centuries of history and tradition, risked becoming the 8-track tapes of financial planning. And that brings us to today, where the entire landscape is under a microscope of intense international scrutiny. The economic shock from the pandemic has only accelerated this, leaving governments desperate for revenue. Add to that the powerful rising chorus in the West for a global minimum tax, and the picture becomes clear. The narrative is shifting. It's like we're watching the final high-stakes round of a game show called Who Wants to Stay a Billionaire? Only the rules have suddenly changed, and all the lifelines are vanishing one by one. This brings us to the fundamental question at the heart of this entire story, and I would love to hear your perspective. What is your true opinion on tax havens? Are they an understandable maneuver by the successful to protect their wealth in a complex world? Or are they parasitic hiding places that allow a privileged elite to opt out of their societal responsibilities? There are no simple answers, but I know there are thoughtful ones, and I genuinely can't wait to read yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of wealth and history, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to join us for more. Thank you, as always, for your viewership. Cheers, and until next time.